Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity to speak to you this evening on a gorgeous night. So, MHPM, my company, we were hired as essentially the district's project manager, sort of the representative with expertise in all kinds of capital projects and experience moving the projects forward. I kind of describe it as if Mayor Henderson and Paul Nash had the vision, it's our job to get it done. And while they were the visionaries, there is some risk management, there's some pragmatism that has to come to the table, and essentially that was our job, to make sure they could achieve their vision and their objectives, yet still within the constraints of a budget, of schedule, and other issues that are faced every day in a major capital project. A little bit of history from our perspective. I believe we were hired probably about a year before you became mayor. I'm not sure if you were on the committee. You were at the volunteer committee at that point, but I guess the point to make here is that this is going to be a very successful project for the District of Sechelt, but it hasn't come without a lot of work, a lot of effort. My predecessor spoke to it. And some pain and some bumps along the way. And anybody embarking on a capital project that thinks, oh, this is going to be smooth, it's going to be easy, when you're dealing with something that can be as sensitive as an urban location and wastewater treatment and so forth, there are definitely, as you, at least particularly in the case of Colwood, are going to understand, there are challenges. And the key to overcoming those challenges is just being, having a good plan, lots of communication, and I'll kind of speak to the things that I think made Sechelt persevere in the end and be very successful as it is. What the project for us originally started as a biosolids facility. So that was the original plan. I don't remember what the budget was, but it was a much smaller, $6 million. It was a much more modest plan. Then came an election, and Mayor Henderson was elected, and there was obviously a change in leadership, a change in vision, a change in priorities perhaps for the community. We went through 3 city administrators prior to landing on the current one, who's been a driving force as well with Mayor Henderson and Paul to kind of move this project forward. So all this is sort of in the planning, that first year of getting the project going and trying to find the right project. So the perseverance is certainly important here, and having a strong vision and leadership, which I'll speak to. In terms of what my organization is responsible, I guess I summarize it in 3 words. It's get it right. We all know of projects that, a lot of millions of dollars here at stake that go wrong. Well, I get paid to get it right. And it really comes down to getting it ready, doing all the right planning at the beginning of the project. And this is in this area is where I believe Colwood, in their case, is doing a lot of this work right now, including forums and venues like this. Then once you've actually gotten a project that's approved, there's a whole bunch of process and diligence and rigor that has to happen to bring it out at the other end. And even when it's up and running in a facility like this or a plant like this, there's still a lot of work to be done to fine-tune it and get it performing optimally for the organization or for the municipality it's going to serve. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process. Paul and Mayor Henderson referred to it a little bit. I'll go into a little bit more detail in some areas, but first I really want to start off at a high level. So obviously, it always starts with a problem. There's a capacity issue, there's a growth issue, there's an aging infrastructure issue, you've got regulatory issues, there's all these issues. That problem can drag on for years and years up here, as you know, until somebody kind of grabs it and says, we've got to deal something with it, or is, by legislation or other regulation is forced to do something with it. And then you get into, okay, well, we're in the idea stage. And I would say that's partially where Colwood is at this point in time in terms of coming up with ideas, sharing ideas, engaging with other communities and getting their input and feedback. And what we've got here is a very simple, very simplified 7-step process that I guess the key I want to say here is each of these steps is equally important. If you forego one of these steps or some of these processes, to try to move forward or to achieve a milestone or a timeline for the wrong reasons, or what may seem right at that point in time, you'll pay for it later. So this is where the discipline and the rigor of project management comes into play. So, and I've put some timelines here on the sideline, and I'll come back and I'll speak a little bit more to that because it has a lot to do with the approach and how you, the delivery methodology, and I'll speak to that, what that is, and that you choose to go forward with your particular project. But the first phase, which I say is a minimum of 4 months, is often 6 months or even greater, it can be years for some projects, is the initiation and pre-project. So you start with a project charter, a defining document defining what the project is, what's the client's vision. You've got feasibility studies on the technical side that have looked at the site, the location, how it's going to fit in, how it's going to impact the community, the technology that might be considered and might be viable. And you start the conversation around what are our requirements going to be? What do we really need? Do we need the energy recovery, and how is that going to feed back or benefit the surrounding community and neighbors and the like? And then we jump into the planning process, and for the project manager, there's an axiom, if anyone here is in real estate, real estate's all about location, location, location. In project management, it's about planning, planning, and planning. So this is by far the most important step. It doesn't take a lot of time. It can be done fairly efficiently, but coming up with a full project plan, defining what your requirements are going to be, developing a very comprehensive project schedule. I have seen far too many projects start, particularly when they're publicly funded, because they're initiated because of some constraint on a delivery date, whether it's tied to the funding application or a grant or other regulatory body. And a lot of times projects are destined to fail because they're being forced to meet some particular date that forces everybody to make compromises, solutions, and decisions. So the advice here is come up with a very realistic timeline, allow for contingency and extra time in what you think it's going to take you. Nobody ever comes back and complains if you finish something early, but certainly the minute you say you're going to be a month or 2 months late, you're going to get unwanted attention likely. The procurement plan. So procurement's a fancy word for how are we going to purchase these services. As a public entity, we have a number of agreements and requirements to afford business opportunities to all of the community and all of the contractors and all the design professionals to go through a competitive process. And there's 3 or 4 standard procurement methods for a project. The traditional one that most people are familiar with is you hire an engineer or some architects, and they go off and they design something, a house maybe, and then you get bids through a tender process. Usually the lowest bid you award the project to, and away you go. That's the design, bid, build approach. There's a construction management approach where you bring a general contractor and their expertise to the table early, working with the design in more of a partnership situation to try to get the benefit of that construction expertise earlier on in the process. It's more of a qualifications selection process than price, and it does allow certain flexibilities and enhancement and innovation at the design table. Design build. So design build is the methodology that Sechelt chose for their wastewater treatment plant. And essentially in a design build model, the single point of contact for both design and construction rests in one entity, which was the partnership of Maple Reinders and Urban Systems in this case. And one of the most important things I've learned in my 20 years working on infrastructure projects, and particularly a reclamation or a water treatment facility, is that the most important decision that is usually made, and sometimes it's for I don't think the right reasons, becomes the most controversial decision, is the actual technology solution. As my predecessors, and I know as Don and Andrew are going to speak after, there's lots of different ways of skinning the cat here. There's different technologies, and by and far, most of them will work. There are pros and cons and benefits of everyone. And what you find is that if you go a more traditional route, which is the design, bid it, build it, you have to make the decision very early on about what technology you're going to use. A lot of this stuff is very specialized. It's patented. There's only certain suppliers in Canada, locally in the world, for some of this technology, and it can be constraining. If you make a decision early on about a technology, you kind of have to live with that, and you're quite constrained as you go through the project. And that could mean in terms of flexibility down the road. It could mean in terms of the market response, the amount of people who are interested in the competitive pricing you get for that type of a solution, the availability of the product in terms of its schedule and how long it's going to take. It does work, and a lot of projects will follow that sort of traditional linear type delivery process, but you have to make that decision early on. There is a unintentional bias, I believe, in a lot of the professionals. They like technology they've used. There's risk associated with it, so you tend to stick within that comfort zone. Getting out of that comfort zone, there's just a little too much risk for them. And as Mayor Henderson alluded to as well, this is foreign for a lot of people, so you rely entirely on your technical professionals for the ins and outs of the technology and recommending to you the very best technology to use. So why was design build better in this case? Well, there was a number of benefits, but when it comes to this technology decision, the district did not have to make that technology decision early on in the project. They could actually, by making a decision early, they would be constrained in terms of the solutions they would get back from the proponents, the contractors, and the engineering teams. By going this approach, they're essentially able to go to the marketplace with their requirements, which Paul put them up on a slide, and although it was a little more detailed in the RFP documents, essentially these are all performance requirements. Meet these standards, meet these flow rates, meet these measured criteria in terms of the quality of the discharge and so forth, and of the water being produced. And how you get there is up to you. And they really pushed the envelope by throwing things in like they did of the site, picking the site, which you could. It added another variable. It made it a little more complicated to evaluate them, the bids at the end, but you're getting that expertise from the very get-go of the design professionals and the contractor working together, which has a lot of synergies. And the result in this case, I think, was 5 or 6 very interesting, very responsive bids, all competitive, and differing solutions that afforded the district a lot of opportunities to go through and pick what was going to work best for them and their objectives. So I kind of deviated. So in a design-build process, it's really about here, between your planning and your design, that you go to the marketplace, and it's one major tender. The traditional approach, if you would design it first, you would go to the marketplace here and issue some type of a request for proposal for a consulting engineer, an owner's engineer, who would then work with you and your team to finalize what the design is going to be. And then here you would be having a traditional, out to the marketplace lump sum type tender. Another key thing, so that's kind of the procurement plan, and I think Mayor Henderson said from his experience that decision to go design build, the process of the design build was I think the most important decision they had made in the project. For me, it was the communications. And this is beyond just the District of Sechelt's project, but communications for me, are the most important thing in a project, not just internal, but especially external, with all of your stakeholders, with all of your community. I've never met, an elected official or an administrator who said, yeah, we probably communicated too much on that project. It just doesn't happen. The rest of this, the devil's in the details when it comes to a process to be followed. You're looking at an 18 to 24 month construction window for small community facilities like this. I will tell you that the design build approach does yield faster results as well. You're looking at a 6-month design because you're going to have construction happening very shortly after design starts concurrently, and as a result, your overall construction window is compressed as well. I guess the other point that's important when planning for one of these projects is the whole commissioning side of it and what you're going to do at the end and how the facility is going to be operated. Paul alluded to this. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made very early on. When you go design build, this is a very, very intensive process. You've got to have the expertise at the table. You've got to have decisions and decision making at the table early on for it to be successful. On a traditional approach, you're usually looking at about a 4-year process from when this starts, depending on how the first few steps go. But once you get into here, it tends to be linear, whereas in design build, you're doing things in parallel, and you can compress your schedule, and without a compromise to the quality or to the process. I guess what do I want to point? I would like to show with you here is that the risk on a project really diminishes as the projects advance. So at the beginning of a project, there's a lot of risk. For the City of Colwood, there's a lot of risk right now where you are sitting on your project. But by the time, obviously, you're well into construction, that risk will be mitigated. And that's where a lot of your stakeholders, your opportunity to influence that risk is greatest at the beginning. And the cost of the changes right now to make a change from one technology to another, even to change a site or anything like that, is relatively modest at the beginning versus at the end. And I guess the key takeaway here is you've got to plan early for the risk that's associated with these projects and really focus formal risk management plans, talking about risk with your steering committee, with those officials. Everyone understands broadly what risk is, but when you start to apply it and quantify it on a particular project, it gets a little more specific, and you've got to address it more carefully. So I guess what's my kind of takeaway from this? You know, projects never fail at the end, they always fail at the beginning. And
what are you trying to say?
What are the things you've got to understand, I think, to get right in your project going forward? Don't underestimate the impact of leadership. I think Sechelt's a great case where when there was the right leadership with Mayor Henderson, with Paul Nash at the table. Paul, you know, brought in as a technical resource. He had also a real champion for the project team, certainly in the public community and in the political arena. Mayor Henderson had to be that champion and provide that leadership through a lot of, as you heard, a lot of, you know, some not a lot, but some adverse opinions. So that was key number one. The planning, that you're speaking to the project management axiom there, plan it, plan it, plan it, plan it, and then replan it. Communications. Let everybody know what you're doing. You know, be open, be transparent, and you know, communicate regularly. And at some point, people kind of get tired of listening to what you're communicating about. They're just kind of get on with it and get it finished type thing. And that's a good situation when you get there. And then the risks. Don't forget there are risks, and certainly take the time and effort to quantify those risks, manage those risks, and look at those risks all the time. And you know, I always caution if I'm speaking to city administrators or the like who are ultimately often have responsibility for some of these projects. If your team is not reporting up to you on a regular basis in terms of these four elements, then you should be concerned. Yes, the budgets matters. Yes, the schedule matters. But you know, these are really the key things that are underneath that. So it sounds easy. It can be challenging, but it's been done before. It's not overwhelming in that regard. You just got to take your time and do the right things for the right reasons at the right time. Thanks.